The siege had dragged into its fifth brutal week when the men of the 14th Infantry Regiment finally admitted what no one wanted to say aloud. They were starving, surrounded, and nearly out of ammunition. The Japanese had sealed every road leading into the valley. Artillery on the ridgelines, machine gun nests covering the switchbacks, and patrols sweeping the foothills day and night. No supply convoy had made it through in 9 days. The wounded lay packed in a schoolhouse converted into a field hospital. Water was rationed in tin cups. Morale sagged lower each hour. And yet, on the southern edge of the besieged town of San Isidro, a single man knelt beside a battered, sun-faded civilian farm truck, a 1938 Chevrolet flatbed that looked like it belonged in a wheat field, not a battlefield. His name was Corporal Eli Bronson, a quiet 27-year-old mechanic from Nebraska with grease-stained hands and a habit of humming to himself while he worked. The soldiers joked that his truck, nicknamed Old Daisy, was more stubborn than any mule on the front. They used it to haul firewood, water barrels, and occasionally the wounded. Nobody saw it as a weapon. In fact, they mocked him for even trying. "Bronson, that thing barely starts on a good day." Sergeant Cole laughed as he passed. "You planning to run over a whole division with a broken axle?" Private Morales grinned. Maybe he's gonna scare them with exhaust smoke. But Bronson didn't laugh. He tightened one last bolt and slid out from under the chassis. The truck looked different now. Reinforced wheel wells, improvised steel plating bolted along the sides, sandbags stacked under the driver's seat, and a strange metal rig mounted to the flatbed. A spiderweb of cables ran from it into the cab. Captain Hargrove approached, weary and hollow-eyed. "Corporal, what exactly am I looking at?" Bronson wiped his hands on a rag. "Sir, it's a breaching platform." Hargrove stared. "And what?" Bronson gestured toward the cliffs, overlooking the southern road. He said we needed ammunition, water, and medical kits. He said the only way out is straight through their choke point. That choke point is guarded by 2 machine gun nests, a dug-in rifle, and overlapping mortars. Hargrove replied. "A squad couldn't survive it." Bronson nodded calmly. "A squad couldn't." He tapped the truck's hood, dented, scratched, and still somehow humming with life. "But this might." Hargrove blinked. "You're telling me you turned a farm truck into an assault vehicle?" Bronson shrugged modestly. "Not an assault vehicle, sir. A distraction." The captain frowned. "A distraction for what?" Bronson looked toward the trapped town, toward the men running low on food, toward the wounded who needed medicine that wasn't coming, for the supply run that needs to get through tonight. In the distance, the sun dipped behind the mountains, signaling the coming of another cold night under siege. Bronson climbed into the driver's seat, the engine coughing, sputtering, then roaring to life with a deep, unnatural growl. The same soldiers who mocked him now watched silently, because they could all feel it. This was no longer a farm truck. This was something else, something unpredictable, improvised, and dangerously clever. And before dawn, it would break a siege everyone believed was unbreakable. Night fell hard over San Isidro, bringing with it the kind of deep, breath-stealing cold that made every man on the perimeter tighten his coat and whisper curses into a scarf. Frost crept across tin roofs. Wind rattled broken shutters in the dark. But down by the southern road, where the Japanese blockade was strongest, Corporal Eli Bronson crouched beside Old Daisy, tightening the final cable connections along the flatbed rig. His breath fogged in the moonlight as he worked. Sergeant Cole approached, voice low. "You sure about this, Eli? That road is a graveyard. Every truck we've sent has been hit before the first bend." Bronson nodded without looking up, because every truck they've seen is a truck they expect. Cole frowned. "And this isn't." Bronson wiped grease from his wrist. "No, Sarge. This one is designed to be seen." The roadblock the Japanese thought was impenetrable. 200 meters down the slope, past a bend in the road, the Japanese defensive line was a fortress of overlapping fire. Twin Nambu, machine gun nests built into sandbag ridges. A deeply entrenched Type 97 anti-tank rifle overlooking the curve. Mortar spotters dug into rock outcroppings. Interlocking trenches crawling with riflemen. A road narrow enough that any vehicle could be flipped or destroyed within seconds. For weeks, nothing had passed through. Supplies dwindled. Desperation grew. And now a battered farm truck, patched with mismatched plates and humming with a suspicious mechanical growl, was being ready to punch through the heart of it. Bronson's improvised rig. Private Morales circled the truck, eyebrows climbing higher the closer he looked. "Corporal, what is all this?" Bronson tapped each component methodically. Reinforced radiator shield. Plate steel fenders angled to deflect rifle fire. 2 braced wooden beams to punch through road spikes. "And this," he said, slapping the large rig on the flatbed, "is a distraction unit." Morales blinked. "And what now?" Bronson pulled the tarp aside, revealing 3 kerosene lanterns, a timing pulley, 2 sheets of polished metal, and a rotating frame of scavenged mirror glass. Morales stared. "You built a light machine?" Bronson nodded. "Light, sound, and silhouette." He rotated the mirror assembly so that the lantern flames flared in sharp, rapid bursts. Cole grunted. "That looks like muzzle flash." "That's the idea," Bronson said. "They think the truck is gun-equipped. They panic. Panic buys seconds. Seconds get our supply convoy through." Morales swallowed. "And the sound rig?" Bronson pointed under the chassis. A metal drum, hollow, bolted near the drive shaft. When the engine revs, it resonates. Makes it sound like a much bigger vehicle, a tracked one. Cole stared. "Bronson, you're telling me this farm truck is going to pretend to be a tank?" Bronson didn't smile. "It's going to pretend to be whatever scares them enough to shoot wrong." The captain arrives with the hard truth. Captain Hargrove stepped into the lantern light, rifle slung across his shoulder. "Corporal, the timing is set. Supply team departs at 0310. They need at least 3 minutes of confusion to break through the gap." Bronson nodded. "I'll give them 5. Hargrove crossed his arms. "Once you're past the bend, you'll be in direct sight of the rifle. You won't last long." Bronson tightened a strap on the door. "I don't need long. Just need to make them look at me instead of the road behind." Hargrove hesitated. The men, they didn't believe in this truck. "I know, sir." "Do you?" Bronson finally met his eyes. "I didn't build this to impress them," he said. "I built it because someone had to do something." Hargrove placed a gloved hand on Bronson's shoulder. "You're either insane," he whispered, "or the bravest mechanic I've ever met." The moment before launch. Bronson climbed into the cab, staring out through the narrow slot he'd carved into a welded scrap plate. The interior was cramped with sandbags stacked against the doors. The wheel rattled with every movement. He checked the lantern rig, steady. The mirror assembly aligned. The resonance drum, tight. Cole leaned into the window slit. "Eli, you don't have to do this." Bronson gripped the wheel. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I do." He pushed the choke forward. The engine sputtered, coughed, then roared to life, deeper and angrier than any civilian truck had a right to sound. The men stepped back as old Daisy shook on her suspension like a waking beast. Lantern light flickered. Mirror flashes stuttered in rapid bursts. Metal vibrated under the resonance drum. The truck no longer sounded like a farm vehicle. It sounded like armor. Cole whispered, "What the hell did you build?" Bronson shifted into first. "A problem," he said. Then he pressed the gas. The truck growled, wheels biting into the dirt, heading straight toward the fortified roadblock no sane man would approach. The Japanese tank crews retreated up the road in a stumbling rush, shouting warnings to one another. Convinced American aircraft were circling somewhere above the smoke-filled valley. The sunny late morning sky, clear and empty, only made the fear worse. If there were planes, they were invisible. If there were bombs, they were falling silently. Morris motioned for his men to stay low, keep out of sight. The less they see of us, the more they imagine. Herrera crawled beside him, breath still shaking. "Sir, isn't this risky? What if they realize the bombs are fake?" Morris kept his eyes on the tanks. "They won't check. Fear doesn't investigate, it reacts." A column in full panic. The 3 lead tanks remained trapped, wedged nose to tail in the defile. Their crews, panicked and believing themselves under an imminent airstrike, attempted to unjam the line by reversing wildly. A metallic shriek echoed down the canyon as one Chiha backed into a terrace wall. Loose stones cascaded down, burying part of its left track. Herrera flinched. 7, he muttered. Morris shook his head. No, they haven't fully abandoned that one yet. Behind them, 2 more tanks ground gears back and forth, trying to pivot in a space far too narrow. Dust clouds rose around them, choking the air. Lemos pointed. Sir, they're abandoning that one. A commander leapt from his hatch, sprinting down the road. His crew followed, waving their arms in warning to the tanks behind them. Now it's 7, Morris said quietly. The illusion tightens. One of the Japanese platoon officers pushed forward, shouting for calm. He climbed onto the hull of the 6th tank and scanned the sky. Morris smirked. He's trying to spot our non-existent fighters. The officer shouted orders to the 2 tanks that still had engines running. They began scanning their surroundings, turrets sweeping the ridge lines. Lemos tensed. Sir, if they spot us. They won't, Morris said. They're not looking for men. They're looking for wings. He grabbed another dummy bomb from a crate. This one had been modified more dramatically. Fuse capped with a salvage brass ring. Metal tail fins straightened with pliers. Herrera frowned. What's that one supposed to do? Look expensive, Morris said. He lobbed it underhand, letting it arc through the air and land squarely between 2 immobilized tanks. The metallic clunk echoed sharply in the stone corridor. Instantly, both crews bailed out, sprinting up the road as fast as their legs could carry them. Lemos burst into a grin. That makes 9. Morris corrected him. It makes fear consistent. That's what matters. The 10th tank falls to its own crew, farther uphill. A Chiha crew struggled to rotate their turret, looking for the tackers. In their panic, they misjudged the defile wall. The gun barrel clipped the stone, torquing the entire turret ring. A grinding, sickening squeal followed. The turret jammed permanently at a 30-degree angle. Herrera winced. Oof, that's 10. No, Morris said. That's them finishing our work for us. The tank commander yelled into the hull, kicked the turret base, then threw his hands up in despair. He ordered his crew out, believing the tank crippled beyond immediate use. They fled like the others, reinforcing the illusion. Morris took a knee, studying the remaining 2 tanks. These sat at the rear of the column and hadn't yet seen the dummy bombs up close. Their engines idled anxiously, commander heads popping in and out of hatches. They're confused, Morris said. Confusion is a doorway. We just need to shove them through it. He pointed to the men. Grab those 2 longboards. Paint the ends red. What for? Herrera asked. Strafing marks, Morris replied. We'll lay them in the dirt so they look like fresh aircraft passes. The human brain sees patterns it expects. The men moved quickly. Dust streaks, scratch grooves, red-tipped boards placed subtly on the ground. From the tank's perspective, it looked unmistakably like a strafing run had just ripped through the valley seconds earlier. Lemos stepped back in awe. Sir, it looks real. It doesn't have to be real, Morris said. It just has to be threatening. The last push. The 11th tank began backing up in fear, but the narrow road gave it no space. Its treads ground against a boulder embedded in the dirt. The grinding deepened, a metallic groan, and then, crack, the left track snapped. Herrera raised a finger. 11. The final tank, 12th in line. Now sat alone at the rear, crew visibly arguing. They pointed at the fallen dummy bombs, the strafing tracks, and the mobilized vehicles ahead. The commander made a decision. He threw his pistol belt over his shoulder, shouted to the others, and all 3 crewmen jumped out, running as fast as they could back toward the safety of their infantry formations. Morris watched them vanish behind a stand of palms. Now, he said softly, that's 12. The tanks are silent, but the battle isn't over. Lemos let out a ragged breath. So you just took out an entire armored platoon with wooden shapes and sand. Morris slung the empty crate onto his back. No, Private. We let fear take them out. Hermes looked back at the burned terraces, jammed vehicles, and abandoned tanks. So we won. Morris turned, scanning the valley floor. No, he said. We've only stopped the armor. Infantry is next, and they're not going to fall for the same trick. He looked at his men, exhausted, sweating, terrified, but alive. Get your gear. We move. The next phase is harder. Because disabling tanks with dummy bombs was one miracle. Surviving the angry infantry following behind them would be another. The southern road sloped downward into the valley like a funnel, narrow, twisting, and illuminated only by moonlight reflected on dust and broken stone. Old Daisy thundered toward it, rattling and growling with a voice that didn't fit her rusted frame. From the ridgelines above, Japanese sentries stiffened. Private Lemos, watching from the hillside with binoculars, whispered, "Sir, they hear it. They definitely hear it." Behind him, Captain Hargrove crouched beside the supply convoy, waiting for the signal. "Hold," he murmured. "Let Bronson get their full attention." Bronson's descent into the kill zone. Bronson kept his hands steady on the wheel, fighting the vibrations. The resonance drum amplified every rev, transforming the farm truck into something monstrous, something metallic and heavy and unfamiliar. He rounded the first bend. That's when the Japanese saw him. A flash of movement from the nearest machine gun nest. A Nambu crew snapping into position. Bronson hit the switch. The lanterns flared. The mirrors rotated. The flatbed rig exploded with rapid, pulsing light, imitating heavy caliber muzzle flash. The Nambu crew froze, startled. They weren't seeing a truck. They were seeing what their minds feared most. A tank firing while advancing. Bronson revved the engine harder. The resonance drum roared like a grinding turret. He heard one gunner shout in Japanese, "Tank. Tank on the road." The ambush line panicked. Machine guns opened fire, but not in controlled bursts. Wild, erratic, rushed. Exactly what Bronson needed. Rounds hammered the steel plates on the truck sides, but the thickest sections held. Bullets punched into the sandbags, spraying grit into the cab. Bronson ducked instinctively, but didn't slow. He shouted into the rumbling noise, "Come on, girl. Just hold it together a little longer." The rifle joins the fight. Ahead, the glint of metal on a ridge caught his eye. The Type 97 anti-tank rifle shifting its aim. Bronson swerved. The rifle fired. Clang. The round punched through the right fender, ripping out a chunk of metal. The truck lurched violently as the wheel well buckled. Bronson gritted his teeth. "Still breathing," he muttered. "That means we're still going." He triggered the light rig again. A rapid, chaotic series of flashes suggesting suppressive fire. The rifle crew hesitated, then repositioned, then hesitated again. They couldn't tell what they were fighting. A truck didn't move like this. A tank didn't look like this. And the flashes weren't matching what they expected. Confusion was now Bronson's armor. The turning point, when the Japanese break formation. Up on the ridge, a junior Japanese officer waved his men into a new position to counter what he believed was an armored threat. But his order collided with a reality he didn't anticipate. The ridge trench wasn't built to fire downward at a tank. It was built to stop infantry. He shouted again. Gun crews scrambled. Mortar spotters lost their line of sight. Flanking squads tripped over repositioned sandbags. The entire defense line desynced. Bronson saw it happen, a ripple of chaos spreading like heat across the dark ridges. He smelled opportunity. Bronson's charge through the bottleneck. He floored the gas. Old Daisy bucked, engine howling, tires clawing through loose dust. Machine gun tracers streaked past the windshield slit. One cracked a mirror, breaking part of the illusion rig. Lantern flames flickered wildly, but the rig still spun, still flashed, still threatened. As Bronson barreled forward, the defenders finally understood. Whatever this thing was, it was not stopping. The Japanese tried to compensate, swinging weapons onto the road. But Bronson's speed and unpredictability threw off every angle. He slammed through a line of bamboo, stakes meant to stop infantry, snapping them like toothpicks. Sparks flew as gravel scraped the undercarriage. Then, the roadblock appeared. Sandbags, timber, a barricade of crates and barrels. Two machine gun nests behind it. Bronson braced himself. "Hold together, Daisy," he whispered. Just once, he struck the barricade. Wham crash. Timbers splintered. Barrels burst. Sandbags exploded into dust. The truck shook violently, nearly spinning out, but it pushed through. Behind him, The machine gun crews fired wildly at nothing, blinded by dust and their own panic. On the hillside, Morales grinned. He made it. He actually made it. Hargrove raised his hand. All units, go. Move now. The supply convoy roared to life, under cover of the chaos Bronson created. The truck sped down the alternate lane he'd cleared by smashing the barricade. And with defenders still firing at the Phantom tank, the entire convoy slipped through the gap unnoticed. Bronson's problem: he's still alone behind enemy lines. But as old Daisy rattled deeper behind the Japanese line, Bronson's situation became worse. He'd overextended. The truck was smoking. The radiator hissed. The right fender dragged against the wheel. He'd gone too far to turn around, but had to find a way out before the defenders realized the truth. He muttered to himself, "Come on, Bronson, you built her to scare them. Now you need her to save you." He looked at the fuel gauge. Low, very low, and behind him, the gunfire had stopped, which meant only one thing. The Japanese were realizing they'd been fooled. Bronson tightened his grip on the wheel. "Round two," he whispered. "Let's hope they stay scared just a little longer." The illusion had worked. Bronson had ripped straight through the Japanese blockade, scattering gun nests and confusing officers long enough for the supply convoy to slip through unnoticed. But now the smoke was settling. The gunfire had stopped. The defenders were recovering their composure, and Bronson was alone, far beyond the enemy line. Inside a valley he wasn't meant to survive. Old Daisy sputtered as she climbed a shallow rise, her engine coughing black smoke. The right fender screeched against the wheel, sending vibrations through the entire frame. Bronson winced. "Come on, girl, just keep breathing." He didn't have a plan for escape yet, but he understood one thing clearly. The Japanese wouldn't take kindly to being fooled. Signs of pursuit. From behind him, faint at first, then growing sharper. Shouts, boots pounding dirt, metallic clatter of rifles, officers barking orders. They were coming. He checked his mirror. Cracked, rattling, barely functional. Shapes moved in the moonlit dust. Dozens of them. A Japanese search party. Bronson muttered. So they finally noticed the tank that wasn't a tank. He yanked the wheel to the right, guiding the truck off the road and into a gully lined with thorny brush. Branches slapped the windshield plate. The resonance drum rattled uselessly. It had cracked during the barricade impact. The light rig still flickered, but weakly, one lantern guttering out. The deception was fading. He needed a new trick, improvising under pressure. Bronson parked in the shadows beneath a leaning acacia tree. He shut off the engine. The abrupt silence pressed against his ears, amplifying every distant shout. He climbed out, boots crunching softly. Herrera's words from earlier echoed in his mind. "You're weaponizing their imagination." Maybe he could do it again. He grabbed 2 tools from a flatbed, a wrench, and a can of kerosene. He also collected pieces of the shattered mirror rig. He arranged them quickly alongside the truck. Then, with the Japanese patrol closing in, he struck a match. Flung. Blue-orange light bloomed beneath the truck's rear axle. Bronson stepped back, shielded his eyes, and nodded. The kerosene burned bright, reflecting off broken mirror shards and casting wildly distorted shapes across the gully walls. To anyone approaching from the ridge, it would look like engine damage, leaking fuel, a dying armored vehicle, preparing to explode. Asterisk, asterisk, not an abandoned trick truck. A wounded monster lying in wait. He dove into the brush as footsteps neared. The Japanese patrol arrives. The first Japanese soldier crept into view, rifle ready, bayonet glinting. He froze when he saw the burning reflection and the massive silhouette of the truck. Another soldier hissed, "Is it disabled?" A third replied nervously, "A tank may explode, stay back." They had no idea what they were looking at. The angles were wrong. The plating was inconsistent. The fire made the metal distort in the dark. But uncertainty is the most powerful threat on a battlefield. The patrol leader motioned his men backward. They retreated several meters and formed a perimeter, unsure whether the vehicle was still a threat. Bronson whispered to himself, "That's right, stay scared." The unexpected twist, a new enemy asset. But then he heard something else. A low rumble. Not from a road he'd come through. From the north, the direction of the valley interior. Bronson's stomach tightened. He crawled higher up the embankment for a better view. A single Japanese Type 94 tankette trundled into the moonlight. Small, fast, lightly armored. Perfectly suited for chasing fleeing saboteurs. Bronson muttered under his breath. Great. A tank that actually is a tank. The patrol broke formation when they saw it. Officers shouted. The tankette crew called out for guidance. They weren't retreating anymore. They were regrouping, and they were coming straight for the gully. Bronson's eyes darted between the wounded farm truck, the burning reflection trap, the narrow slope behind him, the approaching tankette. He whispered, "That's a think of. Think." And then it came to him, a plan so reckless, so desperate, so improvised that even he questioned his sanity. But it was the only chance left. Bronson's last gamble. Turn the lie into a threat. He crawled back to Old Daisy, feeling the heat of the burning kerosene under the axle. The metal frame glowed faintly. He grabbed the broken mirror sections, fragments of a rig he'd spent days constructing, and strapped them haphazardly along the truck sides, angling them upward. Then he took a deep breath, climbed into the cab, and turned the key. "Come on, please." The engine coughed again, then roared to life, louder than before as air rushed over the heated metal. The Japanese patrol whipped their heads around. Bronson punched the gas. The truck lurched forward, the mirrors catching the firelight, sending streaks of blinding flashes into the night. To the Japanese soldiers, it looked like something impossible. A burning armored vehicle, coming back to life. Soldiers stumbled backward in panic. Some dropped their rifles. The patrol leader screamed, "It's still operational. Back, back." The tankette halted, crew confused by the erratic flashes. Bronson didn't aim to fight. He aimed to create chaos. He steered the truck toward a narrow ravine where vehicles typically wouldn't dare travel. He shouted to himself, "If you're gonna bluff, Bronson, bluff big." He floored the gas. Old Daisy shook violently. Sparks flew. The fire flared brighter. Metal wailed. The Japanese line broke in confusion. Bronson disappeared into the ravine, truck and all, before anyone could confirm whether he was man or machine. Bronson's descent into the ravine felt like willingly driving off the edge of the world. The narrow cut in the earth funneled the truck between jagged rock walls, its tires slipping on loose gravel as gravity dragged him deeper. Old Daisy wailed in protest, metal screeching, engine coughing, mirrors clattering like bones in a storm. Bronson gritted his teeth. Easy, easy, just a little farther. Behind him, the Japanese patrol regrouped to the ravine lip, shouting down into the dark. The tankette rumbled forward, its engine growling as the crew angled the vehicle to get a line of sight. One soldier pointed into the ravine. Another shouted. It jumped. It's still moving. The tankette commander barked orders to pursue. Bronson wiped sweat from his brow. He had only bought seconds, maybe less. Inside the ravine, a new risk emerges. The ravine narrowed abruptly, squeezing the truck so tightly that metal scraped stone. The sparks shot out from both sides as the fenders ground against the rock. Bronson tried to steer, but the walls were unforgiving. A sudden jolt threw him forward as the right wheel hit a hidden boulder. The truck lurched sideways, tilted, and Bronson felt the unmistakable shift of weight sliding off center. No. He braced himself. Old Daisy slammed down again, but the suspension held, barely. Bronson exhaled shakily. "You're tougher than you look, girl. Tougher than me." Ahead, moonlight spilled through a break in the ravine wall, a small clearing. But between him and the open ground lay a fallen tree trunk, thick and wedged diagonally across the passage. Bronson stared at it. Of course, the Japanese close in. A shout echoed above him, boots scraping rock, metal clanking. The Japanese patrol had reached the ravine entrance. The tankette's turret rotated, trying to angle downward. Bronson could hear the tankette commander yelling, "Prepare to fire." He ducked instinctively. A tankette's 7mm machine gun wasn't as deadly as a full tank gun, but down in the ravine, With no room to maneuver, it might as well have been a cannon. Bronson assessed the fallen log again. Too thick to ram, too low to drive over, too heavy to move. Then his eyes narrowed, unless he climbed out of the cab, boots sliding on gravel as he crouched beside the log. He ran his hand along the underside. Hollow rock, not everywhere, just the center. Bronson grinned grimly. All right, Daisy, you're gonna hate this. He ran back to the truck and threw the transmission into reverse. The ravine exploit, turning the terrain into a weapon. Old Daisy backed up several feet, just enough for a run-up. Bronson revved the engine, feeling the truck tremble beneath him. Above, soldiers shouted in alarm. The Tankette's barrel lowered. Bronson whispered, "Please fire late, please fire late." He stomped on the accelerator. The truck lunged forward. Boom, thud crash. The impact shattered the rotten heart of the log, splitting it in half. The remaining beams rolled aside, just enough for the flatbed to force through. But part of the rig tore off in the process, sparking as it scraped stone. The lantern rig died. The mirrored assembly fell away in pieces. No more illusion. No more deception. Just Bronson and a wounded truck. The Tankette fired. Tat-a-tat-tat-tat. Rounds ricocheted off rock behind him, sparks cascading like fireworks. Bronson ducked, but kept driving. The ravine opened into a bowl-shaped clearing. He was out, but the Japanese were right behind him. The clearing, no cover, no tricks left. Bronson steered Old Daisy into the open and slammed the brakes, skidding sideways in a cloud of dust. He jumped from the cab, pressing his back against the flatbed as the Tankette rattled toward the ravine mouth. He scanned the clearing. No roads, no heavy brush, no high ground, nothing but dry grass, scattered rocks, and a steep slope leading into yet another ridge. Herrera's earlier words flashed in his mind. You're weaponizing their imagination. He looked at the truck, battered, smoking, half-armored, half-decorated in broken mirror shards, and he realized something. They still didn't know what it was. And as long as they didn't know, he had leverage. Not much, but enough for one final gamble. Bronson's last stand of deception. He grabbed the largest piece of mirror rig still intact, a curved section with reflective backing, and jammed it into the flatbed frame at a steep upward angle. Then he grabbed the last lantern, the only one still lit. He placed it behind the angled mirror piece. The light bounced upward, then outward, then multiplied into a flickering golden beam that shot into the night sky. The effect was surreal, a vertical column of pulsing light, glinting and distorted, like a signal flare or targeting beacon. Bronson positioned himself beside the truck, hammer in hand, ready to defend himself if it all went wrong. The Tankette rolled into the clearing. Japanese soldiers spilled out behind it, forming a half circle. They raised rifles, hesitated, and stared at the eerie light column. One soldier whispered, "Is it calling reinforcements?" Another, "Is it marking coordinates for artillery?" The commander barked an order, but he, too, hesitated, because no one knew what the machine was, not even Bronson anymore. And uncertainty is the enemy of aggression. Bronson gripped the truck's side panel. Every second, they hesitated, bought him life. Every second, they doubted bought, sent Isidro time. And every second the light beam burned was a victory of imagination over firepower. The moment that saved him. Then, from the distant hills, a whistle, low, rising, familiar, American artillery. A single illumination round blasted open in the sky above the valley. The Japanese soldiers gasped as the entire clearing lit up. White, blinding, unmistakable. Not Bronson's doing, just perfect timing. But they didn't know that. To them, the light column from Bronson's truck had just summoned artillery fire. Pure panic erupted. "Retreat," the Japanese commander shouted. The soldiers scattered. The Tankette reversed so fast it nearly tipped. Boots thundered back toward the ravine. Within seconds, the clearing was empty. Bronson collapsed to his knees, breath shaking, heart pounding. He whispered, "Thank you, whoever fired that round." He climbed back into the cab, hands trembling. "Come on, Daisy," he said softly. "Let's go home." And for the final time that night, the old farm truck's engine turned. Weak, wounded, but alive. They crawled back toward friendly lines, victors of a battle fought not with firepower, but with improvisation, terror, and the fragile power of belief. When the siege finally lifted a week later, the men of San Isidro didn't cheer for artillery or for armor or for some dramatic counteroffensive. They cheered for a farm truck, rusted, cracked, patched with scrap metal, and for the quiet mechanic who refused to let a blockade decide their fate. The Japanese never solved the mystery of what Bronson had built. Their after-action report described it as an unidentified armored breaching vehicle exhibiting deceptive muzzle flash and sound capabilities. Another line noted, enemy convoy passed through while our forces redirected fire toward the unknown threat. Bronson laughed when Hargrove read that aloud. Unknown threat, he repeated. That's generous. But to the men who had been starving, wounded, and cut off, it was accurate enough. Old Daisy had been the spark that shattered the siege. A victory with no shots fired by the hero. What set Bronson apart wasn't courage in the traditional sense. It wasn't brute strength or speed or gunslinging bravado. It was improvisation under hopeless pressure. He used deception instead of destruction, ingenuity instead of firepower, a mechanic's intuition instead of a soldier's arsenal. And because of that, the victory came with something rare in war. Not a single casualty on his hands. The Japanese crews who fled the roadblock lived. Bronson and his squad lived. The supply convoy lived. Hundreds of trapped American and Filipino soldiers lived in a war where death was the currency of progress. Bronson bought survival with nothing but noise, light, and courage. After the war, when the conflict ended, Eli Bronson returned to Nebraska and rebuilt his family's workshop. He fixed harvesters, tractors, and roadside engines with the same calm determination that had once terrified an entire Japanese defensive line. He never boasted about San Isidro. He never exaggerated the story. In fact, he rarely spoke of it at all. But locals noticed something odd. He kept a small section of mirror glass above his workbench, pitted, cracked, burn-stained, and next to it, a rusted lantern wick. His son once asked him why he kept junk on display. Bronson replied with a slow smile. Some tools save lives even when they weren't built for it. Legacy of a truck that shouldn't have survived. Decades later, a military historian visiting San Isidro found a remark in an old Filipino officer's diary. It was not a tank. It was not a weapon. It was a lie told loudly enough to become truth for just long enough. And that truth saved the town. Today, in a small regional museum, a scorched but recognizable piece of old Daisy side panel is displayed behind glass. A brass plaque reads, "The truck that broke the siege." It's a reminder that ingenuity can be stronger than armor, that a single mind can outmaneuver an entire formation, and that sometimes the bravest act isn't charging into fire, but making the enemy aim the wrong way. If this story inspired you, do me a favor and hit that like button so more people discover these forgotten acts of courage. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and whether anyone in your family served during the war. And be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next cinematic war story. ****.